Welcome to another spine-chilling journey into the unknown. Today we're exploring 5 horrifying stories from those who work in the most feared place in any hospital, the morgue. These are real accounts from mortuary workers who experienced things that cannot be explained. Places where the line between life and death becomes blurred. Turn down your lights and prepare yourself for what you're about to hear. These stories might just make you question what really happens after our final breath. Story 1: The Midnight Whispers. James had been working the night shift at Memorial Hospital's morgue for nearly 3 years. He was used to the silence, the cold, and the occasional odd sounds the building would make. But nothing prepared him for that night in December. It was just past midnight when he heard it, whispering. At first, he thought it was coming from the ventilation system. But as he moved around the room, he realized the sounds were coming from drawer number 7. Just hours earlier, they had brought in the body of an elderly man who had died alone in his home. No family, no friends to claim him. The whispers grew louder as James approached the drawer. With trembling hands, he pulled it open, expecting he didn't know what. The body lay still, untouched. Yet the whispering continued, now clearly audible. It wasn't English, or any language James recognized. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped dramatically. James could see his breath. The whispering stopped, replaced by what sounded like crying. James backed away, nearly tripping over his chair. That's when the lights flickered, and for a brief moment, he swore he saw a figure standing beside the drawer. An elderly man, looking lost and confused. When the lights stabilized, there was nothing there. But the next morning, a woman arrived at the morgue. The supposedly unknown man had a daughter after all. She apologized for the delay, explaining she had been overseas and had just learned of her father's passing. Before leaving, she asked if her father had been placed in drawer number 7. He always said that was his lucky number, she explained. James never told her what he heard that night, or how the whispering stopped the moment she arrived to claim her father. If you're enjoying these chilling tales from beyond, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Like this video if you want more horror stories, and leave a comment about your own unexplainable experiences. Now, let's continue with our next terrifying morgue encounter. Story 2: The Moving Hand. Dr. Sarah Chen had performed hundreds of autopsies throughout her 10-year career as a medical examiner. She'd seen everything, or so she thought. The body on her table that evening was that of a young woman, victim of a car accident. Brain death had been pronounced at the scene. Sarah began her routine, documenting external injuries before making the Y incision. As she reached for her scalpel, something impossible happened. The woman's right hand moved. Not the subtle shifting that sometimes occurs due to gas release or muscle relaxation. Her fingers deliberately curled inward, as if trying to make a fist. Sarah froze, scalpel suspended midair. She had learned to trust her scientific mind above all else, but what she had just witnessed defied explanation. Taking a deep breath, she continued her work, convincing herself it was just a nerve impulse. But then it happened again. This time, the woman's hand fully closed, then opened. Sarah stepped back, heart racing. She checked all vital signs again. There was nothing. No pulse, no respiration, no brain activity. The woman was clinically dead. She called in her assistant to witness what was happening, but by the time he arrived, the movements had stopped. He suggested it was just post-mortem nerve responses, but Sarah knew better. 2 days later, while filing her report, Sarah discovered something chilling. The accident victim had been an organ donor. The hand that moved? Its bones and tissues were scheduled for donation the following day. Some part of this woman, Sarah became convinced, had been trying to communicate about her final wishes. After that night, Sarah never looked at her patients the same way again. Dead or alive, sometimes the line wasn't as clear as science taught. Story 3: The Missing Corpse. Mike had worked as a morgue attendant at County General for 15 years. The graveyard shift was typically uneventful. Paperwork, basic preparation, and the occasional new arrival. The night of August 17th changed everything. At 2 a.m., Mike received the body of a middle-aged man who had died during emergency surgery. He processed the intake forms, placed the body in drawer 13, and returned to his desk to complete the documentation. Around 4 a.m., he heard a metallic clang from inside the cold storage room. Assuming a drawer hadn't closed properly, Mike went to investigate. What he found made his blood run cold. Drawer 13 was wide open and empty. Panic set in. A missing body was a severe violation of protocol. Mike searched every corner of the morgue, thinking perhaps another staff member had moved it without logging the transfer. Nothing. He checked the security footage. The cameras showed no one entering the morgue since the body's arrival. More disturbing, the footage showed drawer 13 sliding open on its own at 3:47 a.m., but no sign of anyone removing the body. Mike alerted hospital security. A full search of the facility revealed nothing. How could a dead body simply vanish from a secured morgue? As dawn approached, Mike was facing serious questions from administration when a call came in from the ER. A disoriented man had wandered in through the ambulance bay, wearing nothing but a hospital gown. It was the supposedly deceased patient from drawer 13. Medical examination revealed the man had been in a state of extreme hypothermia during surgery, slowing his vital signs to nearly undetectable levels. He had been incorrectly pronounced dead, only to revive in the morgue's cold storage. The man reported no memory of leaving the drawer or how he managed to exit the secured morgue area. Security footage from the hospital's exterior and showed no one entering or leaving during those hours. To this day, Mike cannot explain how a supposedly dead man left a locked drawer and vanished from a secure morgue without appearing on any cameras. He only knows drawer 13 remains empty now. No one wants to use it anymore. Story 4. The Sitting Woman. Lisa had only been working at Riverside Mortuary for 3 weeks when she experienced something no training could have prepared her for. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when they received the body of a woman in her 70s who had passed peacefully in her sleep. Lisa and her senior colleague, Robert, transferred the woman to a preparation table and left to gather supplies. When they returned 5 minutes later, both stopped dead in their tracks. The woman, who had been lying flat on the table, was now sitting upright, her back perfectly straight, head facing the wall. "That's impossible," Robert whispered, his face drained of color. Lisa couldn't speak, frozen in disbelief. Slowly, they approached the table. The woman's body was stiff, yet somehow maintaining this unnatural position without support. No muscle contractions or rigor mortis could explain how a deceased body could move from a supine position to sitting upright. Robert, despite 20 years of experience, was visibly shaken. They carefully lowered the woman back down, which required significant effort, as though her body was resisting. They secured the body with straps, something they rarely needed to do, and continued their preparation. But every few minutes, they found themselves checking to make sure she remained in place. Later, when Lisa was entering the woman's information into their system, she discovered something that sent chills down her spine. In the special instructions left by the family, there was a note. "Our mother always said she wanted to sit up at her own funeral to see who actually showed up." What disturbed Lisa most wasn't just the body's movement, but how precisely it seemed to fulfill the woman's final wish. When she returned the next morning, the straps were undone, though the woman remained lying down. Robert later told Lisa that in all his years working with the dead, he'd seen strange things. Bodies shifting slightly due to gas release, eyelids fluttering, but never anything like this. Some people, he said quietly, just aren't quite ready to accept that they're gone. Story 5. The Cold Breath. David had always prided himself on his rationality. As a forensic pathologist, he dealt with death daily and had never given much thought to the supernatural. That changed during one bitter January night. He was working late, completing the autopsy of a young man who had been found frozen in a snowdrift. The cause of death was straightforward: hypothermia. What happened afterward was not. As David dictated his findings into a recorder, the temperature in the room suddenly plummeted. His breath began to fog in front of his face, despite the building's heating system working normally. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, casting strange shadows across the walls. David felt an inexplicable sense of dread wash over him, the hairs on his arms standing on end. Then he heard it, a deep, rattling intake of breath that didn't come from him. It sounded as though someone was drawing air into frozen lungs for the first time in hours. David slowly turned toward the autopsy table. The body remained motionless, yet he could swear he saw a faint mist rising from the man's parted lips, as if he too was breathing in the frigid air. The temperature continued to drop rapidly. Frost began forming on the metal surfaces around him, spreading across the instruments and tables. The cold was unlike anything David had felt before, penetrating, almost alive in its intensity. Suddenly, the dead man's hand twitched. Not the subtle movement caused by muscle relaxation, but a deliberate motion, fingers curling inward as if trying to grasp something. David backed away, knocking over a tray of instruments. In that moment of distraction, the lights went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. When emergency power came on seconds later, everything had returned to normal. The temperature was stable, the frost gone without a trace. The body lay still, showing no signs of the movement David had witnessed. The official report mentioned nothing of these events. But David requested the man's personal effects and found something that haunted him: a journal entry describing the man's fear of being trapped in cold darkness and his terror of being pronounced dead while still conscious, unable to call for help as his body froze. David never performed another autopsy on a hypothermia victim. Some experiences, he learned, defied scientific explanation, and some deaths echoed long after the heart stopped beating. A line between life and death is thinner than we'd like to believe. For those who work in morgues, this boundary sometimes blurs in ways that defy explanation. Perhaps these stories are merely the products of overactive imaginations, or perhaps they're glimpses into something beyond our understanding. Either way, the next time you find yourself near a morgue late at night, remember that not all is silence within those cold walls. Sometimes, if you listen carefully enough, you might hear the whispers of those who aren't quite ready to accept their final fate. Thank you for joining me through these chilling tales. Sleep well tonight, if you can.